Hi, everybody. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening and spending your Friday night here. This is, I think this is going to be a good presentation. So on behalf of the illustration program, I want to welcome all of you this evening. One of the really great things about being here and teaching is once in a while I get a chance to introduce a speaker that is somebody that I really look up to, and that's the case this evening. When you're an illustrator, you learn pretty early on that working with an art director, once in a while you'll work with an art director that can really bring things out of you that you can't really maybe reach yourself, and those are the people that illustrators really want to work with, and I don't think there's any art director in the country that more illustrators want to work with than our guest this evening. I mean, she's really the premier art director in the genre that she works in, and I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't want to work with her. She's not only like the most influential illustrator or art director, excuse me, in the fantasy sci-fi sort of genre, but she's also very important advocate for illustration in general. She works with the Society of Illustrators and with Spectrum, with a lot of educational programs, and now with Tor.com. And she's a real advocate for our business in our field, and she's also a friend. So it's a real honor and privilege for me to be able to introduce Irene Gallo to you this evening.
Hello, can you all hear me here? Is this good? All right. Thank you for having me out. It's a beautiful city, and just walking around, it's a beautiful school. And I love art and I love storytelling, and so I wound up in publishing and combining these. Illustration is art and storytelling. So I do very much have a passion for illustration, and feel very lucky to be in the position that I am in. I'm the art director at Tor Books, and it is primarily a science fiction fantasy publisher. I've been there for, this summer will be 20 years, which is shocking to me. Also almost 5 years ago, we started a website called Tor.com, which is basically sort of a community outreach. It's kind of a magazine for science fiction and fantasy. We do original fiction, but for every piece of fiction, we also do original artwork. And it's also sort of a news blog and everything else that a website should be. And so I'll talk about these two things. Both my job as a book publishing art director and running the website. That's my office. It's a big mess. I actually recently cleaned it for the first time in 5 years, but it mostly looks like this. And there's a number of paintings throughout. Some of the stuff, actually that's David Grove, and there's one of Greg Manchus is in the audience, so that's one of his paintings. Red Nose Studio is there. This is a Berkey that's now on the wall, I promise. So I do love to be surrounded by artwork, so that's my environment. We're in the Flatiron Building in New York City, which is also fantastic. It's a beautiful historic building, and it's a nice area of town. So I'm fortunate in many ways. Let's see. So in publishing, it's not uncommon that the art director, at least for the covers, does only the covers. I don't deal with any of the interior design or anything else. It's a little unfortunate that these things don't always match up, but it's also, as I say, it's not particularly uncommon. So it's my job to get the outsides of all the books done for our publisher. The website, as I said, we do original fiction, and for every piece of fiction, we hire an illustrator. This one's from Sam Weber, and that's been fantastic for me. It's because there's no marketing department with this. It's all me. The website is anybody I choose, and most of the time works out really well. But even when it doesn't, nobody's after me. So it's because they're not sold. They're released for free. And it's a great way for us as a publisher to reach out to other authors. It's a great way to reach out to readers. So it's really been it was, it sort of started off as an experiment, but it just keeps growing. Every year they want us to do more with it, and so it's been an excellent experience. We also do occasional comics with the website. These are original. Usually we try to keep them in the 5 to 10, 12 pages. And that's something that at Tor we had never done before. So that was another fantastic way that the website's been able to sort of expand the work that we can do. So this is a season. We do 3 seasons a year. Again, in publishing, it's not uncommon that people work seasonally. Some people have 4, others have 2. We work with 3 seasons. So all of these come to me as just titles and authors, and they're fantastic at this point because they're also evocative, and not a single one of them is late or has a problem with it, or there's no unhappy authors at this point. It's just a list. And I've got to get all of these done for the beginning of that season for a catalog due date. Let's see. And I know, I get to know a lot of the authors we publish over and over again, so I sort of get to know the look and feel of those. We do a lot of series. This is all, by the way, is going to be all the examples are going to be heavily science fiction and fantasy. So I don't think I think it all applies to other things, but science fiction and fantasy in particular, probably young adult as well, is very series oriented. So one of the curse and blessing of that is when I get this list, there are a number of titles here which I sort of automatically know which artists they're going to go to. The downside of that is not having as much room for new people as I would like sometimes. The other part of that's a little risky for me is that if I'm going to commit the next 3 to 6 to sometimes 12, 14 books in a single series on a look, I want to be very sure right up front that look is going to sustain a whole series. And it makes me a little more conservative on the artists that I can pick. And that's another reason why the website is great, because I can sort of branch out a little more. I can take a lot more risks. But when you start to see, why does the art director always work with these certain artists? This is part of the reason. It's is it always part of the series? Is it an artist that the art director is comfortable and says, I know I can commit these 10 books to? This is sort of the old catalog, but nonetheless, it's pretty much what the catalog is. And this is what, when a publishing company goes to what we call the book buyer, we're not really talking about so much the customer and when we use the term book buyer, what we're talking about is the people that buy the books for the bookstores. So we take this to the book buyer and we talk about it's a great author, it's got this great cover, it's got these quotes on it, these are the marketing plans. So these are materials that our sales force will go to the book buyer with and say, you should carry lots of copies of our book because of all these awesome reasons. At this point, Barnes & Noble is obviously, is the biggest bookstore that we have and that we can work with. The scary part about that is that they have one buyer per genre for the entire country. So there's one science fiction and fantasy buyer that buys for the entire nation. So that guy has a whole lot of power. His opinions matter a whole lot to us. Luckily, he's an artist. He went to SVA. He's a really cool guy. We like him a lot, so it works out well for us. But it is, it's one of the sort of realities of the business is that there's very few people making decisions for the rest of the industry and any fans. So this is about deadlines. So a lot of times when I'm working with people that are editorial artists are great because when they see when the deadline is 2:00 on a Thursday, whatever it is, they tend to hand it in 2:00 on a Thursday. They know the magazine, the newspaper, whatever it is not going to run if they don't have it. Within publishing, the deadlines are a little shakier. They tend to move a bit more. And but it's not a good thing. I always say to students, learn deadlines now, because what happens is, this is the catalog that's done at the beginning of the series. This is the first of many deadlines for me. This is not when the book is going to the printer to be printed for the world, but it is part of the sales materials. And what happens is, our salespeople, when they could have been showing them, some of our nice covers, which all of this now is in color and online and everything, but this was sort of back in the old printed catalogs. But when they show up with this, they don't get as many books out into the bookstores. It doesn't kill the book. The book is still, this is, again, not when it's being printed. So, you miss one deadline, and then the artist, I'll hear I missed a deadline. Suddenly they had 3 extra weeks, and that means they were jerking me around. That's not what it means. What it means is that they went into a meeting not really fully prepared. The book didn't do as well as it could have. And in the long run, the salespeople may or may not know the artist's names, but they definitely know how well the book did, and they definitely want to copy successes. So the more that your work is associated with very successful products, the more that they will request, if not by name, then say, oh, we want it to look like that other book that did really well. So the best materials that I can give our sales force, that helps the product, it helps get the books out, it helps readers go into the store and connect with them, and in return goes back to helping you guys again to get that next job. So where do I find artists? I find them pretty much everywhere. Annuals are huge for me. I think they're, it is advertising you can't buy in a sense. However, you can improve your chances. Submitting, quite a bit and sort of learning what each annual kind of has its own flavor. Spectrum is one that obviously I would use quite often. I use the Society of Illustrators a lot. There's American Illustration, but like knowing where your work would fit well and really sort of, trying to get, and not sending in just one or two examples. Artist after artist will say that, oh, I got the piece in that I threw in at the last minute. It's not the one I thought would get in. But they sit around my desk, my very messy desk, as you've seen. I'll just keep them there. I'll have a couple years where it's just at arm's length, constantly going through those. And even if I'm on the phone just chatting with somebody, I like just absentmindedly pick them up and start flipping through them. So I find the annuals to be, they're vetted, it's all good work. So I find that to be very useful. Mailers are still useful. I don't think you need to be elaborate with them. I think just a postcard, simple postcard, nice big bold image is great. I do, we'll get a few mail drops. I'm going to say these are the annuals. There's mailers. There's, I'll get, that's maybe 2 weeks worth. So it's a lot, and the odds are not, it sounds like the odds are not great, but I do find that I'm reminded of people that I'd noticed, like maybe in an annual like a year ago, and I suddenly get a new postcard and it reminds me to go look up their website. And it really just has to be something simple. I'll get these very elaborate constructed things, and it's you really just want to show the work off, make it, have it linked to a website. People used to send like objects and things, and that's not as necessary. But and I'll go through them quickly, but the ones that I like, I just sort of leave on my desk, and then 6 months later, I'm cleaning my desk, and I find it again, and I go back to the website. So I still find that they're useful. Networking, I think, is huge, and I think networking goes along with artist recommendation. Just going to conventions, for science fiction and fantasy in particular, there's a convention every weekend you can go to, and there's Comic-Con and things like that. Going to these things, meeting other artists, meeting people that hire art. Going to the Society of Illustrators is another thing. I'm lucky enough to be in New York, so I'm at the Society of Illustrators a couple times a month at least, if not like every other week, which is a couple times. But I think meeting people, I think you learn so much that way, and I find so many people because of other artists recommended them. It's amazing what an incredibly open field that this is. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email from somebody, or I've been at a convention and some kid walks up and says, John Foster said I should show you my work. And I go through it, and it's great stuff. So I go to bookstores, all the time. I always want to know who did what, whether I like it or not. I want to know who did it, which does lead me to, when you're doing your work, I will sometimes hear, well, this job didn't pay as much. I didn't put as much into it. Once it's out in the world, your name is on it, and you got to own up to it. So you always do have to do your best job. Not everybody can on every project. That's I understand that as well, but it's tough because there's every season there's a couple of books that I wasn't quite happy with the cover, but I can't sit in every Barnes and Noble and say, well, the marketing department, and then the deadline changed, and once it's there, and you just have to own up to it. So you really do have to do your best work at all times. Online communities also are like more and more. I'm on Twitter all day long, and I'm on Facebook, and luckily I get to call it work. But I do find more and more I'm finding just seeing artists that I didn't know about pop up. Also, I'm amazed, again, going to occasionally I'll have asked a question on Twitter, and all these artists that I already know will answer like, oh, you should take a look at this guy or that guy, and so it's another way that sort of the online communities have been very helpful to me. Blogs are, I think, we can get into that a little bit later, but so all these Tumblrs and everything else, I think they're very useful. So that's, sorry, just kind of looking. Portfolios. So once we get down to a portfolio, if you go to the conventions or get to go to any event that an art director will go through a portfolio with you. There aren't as many people that just sort of show up in the office anymore. It used to be that people would come to New York and try to get an interview, but I'm sure, at any event that you can go through a portfolio with someone. About 12 pieces I think is good. I want enough to know that the artist is consistent. And this is very true for people just coming into the industry. This is very, when I look at students just graduating and trying to get into illustration, the one thing I need to know is that they're very consistent with their work. I would say that artists are hired on their worst work, not their best work. I need to know that on your worst day, I can live with that on a book cover, that I can put an author's career, a publisher's business in their hands on their worst day. So that means, if you come out of school and you've got 8 images you love and a couple that you don't, you just got to keep working. You got to make sure that every image is absolutely top notch. Consistency again is the first thing I'm going to look for in a portfolio. Showing work that answers a problem. A lot of times I'll see portfolios that include like figure drawing or still lifes and things. These are great. I love to see that sort of stuff, but keep that on blogs, keep that elsewhere. In an actual illustration portfolio, you want to show an art director that you're answering problems, you're doing illustration. I always hate to speak ill of my kind, but you don't want the art director to have to think too much. You want them to just imagine every page is one of their problems solved. In my case, it's title and author and a quote, and so, if it's advertising, it's something else. If it's gaming, it's something else. But you really want them just to imagine that you are going to help them in this collaboration. Showing the work you want to get is also. I'm amazed again, like how often I'll see somebody with like all these spaceships and say, but what I really want to do is dragons. You really have to sit down and draw some samples of what you want to do. It seems obvious, and yet I run across it a lot. So showing the work you want to get is important for your own growth and for sort of building the career you want. And great figure work, especially within science fiction and fantasy, is very figurative based. There's a lot of things you can cheat. There's a lot of things I can hire people that are, like Dan Dos Santos, I always point to him. He had fantastic figure work, and he would just be a little, right out of school, and the backgrounds were a little less so then, and I was able to hire him right away. And he's then since worked on his craft and has gotten himself, has evened that out. But the figure work I can't compromise on. So I think, that pretty much, and again, the figurative work, like within fantasy, we do a lot of realism. We can also do a lot of stylizations. This is Eric Fortune, this is Julie Bell, and I love Eric's work. I've used him on a number of book covers and other things. And it's really understanding the kind of stylization. It's not a mistake. It doesn't look like he's sort of masking an inability with claiming it's a style. Like, he's really worked on this, he's really mastered this. And I think, again, looking at more younger people's portfolios, when they're sort of struggling with something, they kind of fall into a style maybe a little more quickly than they should. I think, but once it, but you can really tell that Eric Fortune could do this, and he's just chosen to become more of a more expressive artist. Figures in motion tend to be very difficult to do. Not only that, but this is Greg's. This is one of Greg Manches's. Figures in motion are difficult to make look very naturalistic. And I also think, and doing lots of figures, it's hard to get an artist to do a crowd scene. But if you can master these things, you'll be very hireable. People will, if the pool of my artists is like this, once I want to do a scene, this wasn't for us, but if we wanted to do something, like this, suddenly my pool from here went to this. There's like 3 people I could think of that'd be willing to take on this many characters, this much action. And so if it's, just in terms of your own work, just being able to take on a sizable project like this makes you very hireable. Showing, this is both the same artist, this is Dave Palumbo, sort of a younger artist, showing putting in your portfolio work that's appropriate to that client, even though these are from the same artist. This is an illustration job. This is sort of a more sort of pin-up thing he does for conventions and things. He would never put this in that portfolio, and knowing the difference is pretty key. I know people at Scholastic, they say once there's a nude in a portfolio, they throw it out. And it's not that anybody's offended by it, but it's just if you just don't even understand the client that much to know that, like within children's books, you're never going to show these things. It's like showing the client that you know what their problems are and that you can solve those problems. So it's not that you can't do both, but catering your portfolio to different people is really important. I don't know if anybody's gone to Comic-Con or whatever, but that's a good opportunity where you can meet comic book art director, you can meet a gaming art director, publishing art director. These all are very similar people, but they're not the same. And knowing the difference between them could get you a job or not get you a job based on how you present yourself and what you put in those portfolios, which just means carry 3 portfolios or have an iPad that you switch back and forth between portfolios. I can complain about websites all day long. Websites are so important, and people make them so aggravating to get through. Updating them regularly is absolutely key, especially when you guys are young and just getting into the field. Hopefully you guys are getting better, like with every painting. And I'm amazed how often I'll see students and really like their work. And I will remember, I'll go to these events or go to portfolio reviews at other events, and there's usually like 2 or 3 people whose names will stick with me for like a year, and I'll be like, oh, I wonder what that guy's up to. I'll go to the website, and it's not updated, and again, hopefully you're improving constantly. And it's really, and even, going to a convention and I'll see somebody's work there, I'll know that their new work is really great. But if I want to show it to an editor, I can't tell them, well, it's this, but better. He's better now. He doesn't, so you really just want to make sure those things are updated. Pop-up windows drive me insane. You think this is not very long until you're clicking on those things all day long. I'll get through 2 or 3 pop-up windows and then go away. Everybody uses them. It's sort of a battle I've lost, but if anybody following me on Twitter knows that I complain about this about once every 6 weeks. The quicker it is to get through a website, the longer the art director will stay there. It's there are websites that everything just loads up quickly. I can scroll through things easily, and I'll spend an hour there. Once I sit through 2 or 3 pop-up windows, I'm out of there. Thumbnails, not indecipherable little details. I'll show you sort of examples of that. I need to see a lot of work really quickly. If I've seen, were you going to ask a question? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Feel free to shout out questions. I tend to talk really fast and sort of get, maybe get ahead of myself. But feel free to shout out questions, and I will try to get through this, so that there's time for actual questions. So you just want to make the website really navigable. Which means these are like the little details. These little things, I'll come here and I'll click on 1 or 2 of these things, and you'll have no idea what that image is going to be. I want to go there. If I'm looking for somebody specifically that does great landscapes, and I don't know if any of these are a landscape. If I'm looking for somebody that does great portraiture, I don't know that if any of these things are great portraiture. And also lately I've seen everybody just list the title of the project. They don't even show thumbnails now anymore. I don't know why this became so popular, but it suddenly has been fairly popular. I'll click on 2 of them, not find what I want, and go somewhere else. Or I'll click on 2 of them, find something I want, go check out a few other people, come back, and I have no idea which one of those things it was. I'm not good at playing the game of memory. So you really want to make these just a quick overview of what your website is. This is just too small. This might be a great painting, it might be something I want to use, but when it's tiny because you're afraid somebody's going to steal it, at that point it's just too hard to see if I can actually use that. I just need to see it up a bit bigger. And watermarks, again, value is so important to an image, the values that are in it, and at this point, I'm kind of squinting at it to not quite see the watermark, and I sort of try to look at it sideways, and that's just not how you want an art director to see your work. And even if I can sort of overcome that, again, I need, occasionally I'll need to show these things to editors, and you're trying to sort of explain away the schmutzy part in the middle. Interviews, I would say, never apologize for your work. And this happens a lot with students especially, and it's a nervousness more than anything else. When they start sort of explaining, oh, well, this one, I didn't quite get the reference I wanted, and oh, the reproduction on this one, the painting's better, and, it's, again, I think it's just a nervous quality. It's wanting to say something if nobody's talking. But you really, again, like, as I said earlier, I can't sit in a bookstore and explain why I kind of wish this book cover would be better. You're asking an art director to take their time and to look through your stuff and to, give you feedback. So you should present everything as best you can, and you just have to sort of live up to what that is. Same with arguing critiques, and I think if you've asked them for a critique rather than just to look at the portfolio for possible work, you don't have to agree with people, but you should just take it in. And I don't think it's people mean to quite argue, but if I do start saying some things and they'll explain why they didn't do it that way, why they never wanted to do it that way, it's sort of, you're asking for an opinion, and just take it in, think about it. You could reject it later, but it's just polite to listen if you've asked. And again, I don't think people mean it. They're just sort of nervous to say something. Thank you notes are a great excuse to send work again, and just to send a little follow-up. It's a polite thing to do. Say, hey, remember me when I was at, a lot of people hear a lot of names throughout. If you're at these conventions or other events, they're going to hear a lot of names, but just say, like, it shows you your work. They will probably remember the work. You can remind people where you met them. So that's always just a nice way to follow up on things. This is going back to the website a bit. So we did launch the website about 5 years ago, and as I say, we spent a decent amount of money getting the images for each short story, and we're releasing them for free. So we're getting nothing back for it except for publicity. And what was amazing is that immediately Apple, when they were launching the iPad, they loved the covers, and they gave us huge placement throughout their bookstore just based on the artwork. And it was really nice. It was really nice for my bosses to be getting calls from Apple saying, we really want to put your work front and center just because it looks amazing. This is also an interesting way how, just sort of how publishing's changing and everything. The iPad was being launched, and this is a book that we've been publishing for 30 years. It's always been doing very well for us, but when iPad was launching their iBook store, we thought, let's make a specific ebook only cover, and mainly that was just to give everybody an excuse to talk about it again. Why, of all the books that were going to be released on iPad, let's just give a reason for the blogs to start sharing it, for Apple to start using it in their advertising. So it was just an interesting way of sort of this new publishing models. This is a Sam Weber. If anybody's a real diehard fantasy fan out there, this is one of our big fantasy series, and we've been publishing this for 20-something years. And the author actually, sadly, died before the last book could be released, so there was a 4-year gap between one of the books and the conclusion. And one of the things we decided to do was re-release the ebooks with new covers, different artists on every cover. And this story really was about community building and reaching out to the fans of the series based solely on the artwork. And the fans went crazy. They just loved it. Every month they got to tear it apart or love it and fight about who was right, and fight about whether or not the character looked perfect or they didn't look anything like they imagined. And it really built the community month to month. So a year leading up to the conclusion of this series, we were able to rebuild its fandom basically on artwork. I'm going to talk you through a project real fast, and what I realized, this is not to keep using Greg as an example, but this is a project that I was working on with Greg Matches, and what amazed me is that the first time I ever spoke at a class, I got in a little bit early. It was Vincent DeFate in New York, and I suddenly realized, I got in a little early and they were just finishing up a crit, and I realized, wow, it's what I do is no different than what I did in school. The process is exactly the same, and I had sort of forgotten that until I was in this classroom. You do thumbnails, you start the painting, and one is picked, and there's a little bit back and forth, and that's it. So this was a book called Lion of Ireland, and it's a historical book. There's kind of a fantasy element to it, but a little bit more based in history than a lot of our stuff. So the old kings of Ireland. So he did a whole series of really quick thumbnails for the book. We really just basically wanted a heroic portrait of the lead character. I think at this point, I don't know if at this point I would normally see this loose. I think we got these for the purpose of the lecture. Here he is just working out some simple shapes, some ideas. This is what he actually sent me up front. Just different ideas of land. We knew that there was basically going to be, hero plus great Irish landscape. So here he's working on a couple more, showing a little bit more of the landscape. This one I always love and I want to go back to and do someday. It's got little notes about lighting and whatnot. And then he did one that was kind of a wraparound idea. One of the things he did and he emailed me all these, and sometimes you go into a class and I'll show these, and they go like, he did all that for one project. And the great thing about the art director loves this, because suddenly there's a lot of ideas to work with. There's a lot to talk about. It becomes very collaborative. I said, once you get one job, the thing is to get more jobs. So if you show them lots of ideas and that you really, thought about it in a couple of different ways, they get very excited about working with you as an artist. I also would say, he roughly mapped out, that it's a book cover, pretty traditional here. And once he got here, he did it a little, we never asked for a wraparound, but he included this little thumbnail, and that quickly showed me what he was thinking. Like he changed the parameters of the problem, but he was kind of, without saying it, he just with a quick little extra thumbnail, he showed me how it still fit what I needed. And I thought, it was a great little shorthand. He probably never even thought about it while he was doing it, but even though, I never had to say, but there's no room for type, but there's, but we didn't want that. I was like, oh, I see exactly how this would fit into what we were trying to do. At this point, I actually am sort of missing one. There was one without the girl, and originally, at one point, sales got it into their head that there has to be a female, because more women read than men, there has to be a female character in any book, whether or not it was fit the story or not. And in this case, it was kind of a late addition to it. And it was kind of neat because he actually kind of had her a little too fantasy, a little too heroic here. It didn't quite fit the mood of this particular book. So then here but we wanted to keep her a strong character, just not quite with the sword and the little more fantasy style clothing. So this now is probably, we agreed on this at this point. And it's apparently his pre-model shoot. There's no real reference here. Maybe he's looking at things, but there's not, it's not quite the most detailed drawing at that point. He then obviously got the model, did some reference, just drew in a lot more of the details. He sent this back to me so I could once again, at this point I'm getting a much clearer idea what the image is going to look like. I can also at this point, which is nice, I can start laying in type and thinking about what we might do. In this case it was fairly straightforward, but it's nice to have something so solid that we can start our production work on it before the painting's even done. So that was the final painting in the book jacket. Author was very happy. I'm going to talk you through, I am going through this quickly. I'm just going to, it's very pixelated. Here's just a couple of covers that I'll just show, and some of them have stories and some don't. This is, steampunk is big for us right now, which people like, all the gears and everything. This is Victor Cohen, an artist in New York. Had a very metallic style, so it worked out very well. This is actually printed on a metallic paper, so it really goes with the steampunk aesthetic. This is Alan Williams, who does a lot of actually, this is sort of an offshoot of steampunk. Alan Williams does quite a bit of movie concept work, and I met him at Comic-Con and at Illustration Masterclass, is a intensive program that I teach at with a couple of other people. He was one of the students there, and I was able to hire him straight out of there. This is interesting also, like new publishing, electronic publishing. This is a series, a science fiction series that we've been publishing for quite a while. The new book was coming out, and this will be a traditional book, but in the meantime, we're releasing it actually serialized. And with 13, we're doing it in 13 episodes. We're calling them episodes because you can read them each individually, but there's a overall story arc throughout it. And the cool thing here is that we were able to hire the artist John Harris to do 13 sort of these pastel drawings for each episode. You buy them on iTunes and through Kindle and the rest, episode by episode. Plus, then on the website we can have discussion groups based around them and everything. So again, it's just like another way that we've been able to expand our commissioning. There's John Foster. There's another steampunk. Not much to say, but a pretty picture. Tomer Hanukkah. Every once in a while, we can go into sort of a more stylized look, and that's always fun when we can do that. This is Victo Nagai, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope so. She's fantastic. She's just like a year out of school and is just doing amazing things. This is actually one of our short stories that'll be coming up. The short stories appear online for free, but you can also buy them for 99 cents through iTunes or whatever. And for the ease of reading, for a buck, it's a little easier to go through and read it on an iPad rather than on a website. So we do sort of these cover versions of them. This is interesting. This is a science fiction novel where America has gone through a bit of an apocalypse. It's a dystopian future, and kind of has reverted back to sort of a 19th century technology. So I was able to hire Ross McDonald, who's really fantastic. He's an illustrator plus a letterpress artist. And this was a case where I saw him lecture at ICON. I don't know if any of you know the Illustrators Conference, but I saw him lecture there years earlier and loved his work and loved his work with typography and everything else. I thought, wow, I'll never be able to work with him. And then this book came along, and then two or three others came along that he was perfect for, like suddenly. So again, like just sort of being present in the world and networking, again, is like I always think is absolutely key. And going to these conferences and conventions and things, you never know. It might not lead to something that day or even that year, but you never know whose head you got stuck in, and they might give you a call later on. Keikai Katagi's a gaming artist mostly. He's been doing a lot of work for us lately. This was an interesting. This is John Jude Palancar. He's been compared with this author for quite a while for us, and it's been a really it's a nice case where the author and the artist really feel like each other's work. It's been a nice pairing for quite a number of years for us. And he handed in a series of sketches for this. This was, and I fell in love with the sketch that this was for. Absolutely loved it. I was really excited about it and showed it to the editor. I was like, this is gonna be awesome, and he was excited. We did it. I was really happy with it. Showed it to sales, and they're like, that's really dark. And I was like, shit, you're right. And it's not that dark would be a problem for anybody else, but for this author, it really didn't fit what this book was and what this author is. And as much as I loved it and as good a job as he did on it, it really took, I sort of forgot my job there. I forgot that it's not just for me to like something, it's for me to answer the problem again, answer this particular problem, and this didn't do it. So we went back to John, and I just said, we need to lighten it up, and so he did this, which was also really beautiful and was perfect for the book, and sales loved it, and so it ended well. But it was an interesting, I had to again sort of remember what my job is. This was a Sam Weber. The interesting thing about this, I was a little worried. The more I'm in my job, the more I'm going to meetings, and the less I'm designing things. And I also, because I love illustration, I tend to be a little too careful of the artwork, so I find that my designers are much better at it than I ever was. One of the things the designer did is that this shoulder is in the painting here, and he kind of shifted it over a little, and I loved what it did for the book, and I was a little nervous showing it to Sam, but Sam's a friend, so I thought, hopefully, and he loved it, and so I was very happy. Like, some artists will be really upset when you do things like that, but Thankfully he liked it, and I never would have done it. So thankfully I have my crew. Goni Montez, he's sort of a newer guy. This is a series of sketches he did. This was a short story thing for the website. He's really good with these really complex shapes and things, and it's really, and he'll take, this is a thumbnail. This is, I guess that's the one we chose. And again, he'll show a nice array of ideas, completely, different ideas, which is fun. And then usually he'll show me like the ink drawing in between before he goes to the color, and then we got that as the final. There's a Brad Holland. Not too much to say there. That looks good. Mike Whalen. Mike Whalen does mostly gallery work at this point, but we were launching a big series. Here's a case where the artist becomes a name brand. Within science fiction, this can happen. Certainly happens in children's books and picture books, where the artist really can make a name make a name outside of the illustration community. So you get Michael Whalen. We can go to the bookstore and say we have a Michael Whalen cover, and they will say, oh, we'll take many more copies of the book than we were originally thinking. So he's. It's a fun industry that way, that it does reach beyond the illustration community. There's actually, when you go to the conventions, the artists are guests of honor. There are people that are fans of the artists that don't have any connection to actually doing artwork themselves, and Whalen is definitely one of those. So when we were launching a big new series for us, we went to him, and thankfully he was able to do it, and it made a big statement within the community. Sometimes we get to do interiors, not too often, but every now and then. This is Vance Kovacs. This was for a short story that we'll be publishing. This is Chris Bizzelli. I don't know how many of the people know these names as I'm shouting them, but Chris is an amazing guy, and probably, I guess, mostly does editorial and advertising work, and so we were able to give him some short stories. This is a case where it's really hard to pick. It's a very dark story, kind of childlike story, called The Hanging Game, and it was very difficult to pick one of these sketches. I still would love to. We picked this one in the end. I would still love to see this one painted, but that's the final. Let's see what else. Sometimes we use photography. Not science fiction and fantasy. You can't photograph a lot of it, but every now and then we can. So near future or contemporary world like stuff we can. Occasionally we can use all type. Again, not often, but when we can, it's sort of fun. This was a new project, or a book that hasn't released yet, and I have no idea how to pronounce the guy's last name. It's Will Steele. Does anybody know it? But he's a great designer illustrator, and he came up with this was a heartbreak to pick one of these. Actually, that's the final. That was one of the choices, and these I would love to see all of these out in the bookstore. But those were a lot of fun. This is my drawing. This was actually an interesting thing where we did an actual, it's a very long story, I'm going to try to not tell this story, but we did a sort of a poll of science fiction and fantasy book titles, and we realized that the most popular fantasy book ever should be called Shadow War: The Night Dragon, Part 1. And if you combine all the titles from the last 10 years, those are the most popular words. So we released it kind of just as a joke, and then one of our authors, who happens to be very funny, was like, I want to write that. I'm like, I want to art direct that. We actually hired him then to write the short story, Shadow War: The Night Dragon, Volume 1. And we released it as an April Fool's joke, saying that this was going to be our big release, and some people got it because it was April Fool's. Other people were like, oh my God, I can't wait for this. He actually and then his agent called and said one of the producers for one of the Harry Potter movies was like, well, we want to option it. And unfortunately, the agent told him it was a joke, and the author was like, are you kidding me? I could have written it. Like, if you're going to give me real money for it. But so I went to the artist, and I said, we just want like a dragon and these two knights here. And, the first 3 paragraphs basically equals it's a dark and stormy night within this story. It's a very funny story. So I just said dark, stormy night. So this is, I don't often give thumbnails, but if when I do, this is the quality of work you might be seeing when you go to your art directors. So it was a very fun project. We're actually this is top secret, can't tell anybody. We're making it into a musical for this upcoming April Fool's. No shit. So This is Victo again. This is how the short stories appear on the website, and this just won a gold at the Society of Illustrators, so I was very, very excited about Victo. And this was an amazing case. I saw her work in the student show. I hear some of you guys are, like 10 of you guys are in the upcoming student show, and that is a fantastic place for art directors to find students. The work is amazing when you go see that show, and I'm amazed. I've actually hired people that were still in school based on that show, and I didn't even realize like they hadn't graduated yet. But so she's only been, I remember her work about 2 years ago in the student show, and now she's like winning awards and things. So this is the rocket ship. This is the logo for the website, and we just did a long. Greg did the logo. And then we did a long sort of process post about how we got to the rocket and making it. If you go to tor.com and you can see that all the sketches that came between. There was a lot of sketches to get there, which is sort of the fun stuff that we're able to do now within publishing. That's not strictly book jackets. I think that's it. That is it. I got through that a little quicker than I normally do. Are there questions? Because that is the fun part. So if there's any questions at all, please do not be shy. Right there. I went to school. I went to Cooper Union, and I just went to art school without much thought about what that would mean in my life, which is a terrible thing. But I did a lot of design once I was there, and I always liked books, and as I say, I love storytelling. So as soon as I got out of school, I got a job at a very tiny little production company for publishing, and our main client was Tor, and within about a year, Tor hired me directly as the assistant to the art director. And then about a year after that, the art director left, and I was sort of the last person standing. So mainly through design, I think, is at least within publishing. I think most art directors come in through design. I think it's probably different through gaming and video games and card games and things like that. But everybody will tell you it's dying, and yet we're always doing a better year than we did the year before, always. So it's strange. It does feel a little precarious, and Amazon is a terrible company that really would like to drive everybody out of business. And so we are fighting that. We actually sort of famously were one of the last companies trying to fight the monopoly that Amazon has created. So it always feels a little, as I say, a little precarious, but yet we always seem to be doing better and better. And the ebook market what is dying is the mass market. So mainly I deal with hardcovers. When we say mass market, we mean the little pocket-sized books, the ones you would see like in airports or in supermarkets and things like that. That industry is dying, but that's where the ebooks are. Basically, ebooks are taking over for those little pocket-sized books. So I think when you're talking about hardcover and trade paperback and then online and ebooks and stuff, it does seem to keep. We seem to keep doing well. So. That's a really good question. I hate to say no. It is an excellent question, and our budgets have remained largely the same. And it is, it's funny because we talk a lot of people with friends of mine about like what the gaming budgets are and what comics and everything. And I think we pay well for the industry, but the industry has not been rising. I think we're doing well. We don't find that there are better and better margins per book. We're not making, I think it's doing well with a lot of work, So no, I think, as I say, I think we pay very fairly within the industry, but it has not risen much. And I do think that is something that artists should, be aware of, especially, as I say, it's the comic book industry is very difficult, I think, that way. And a lot of the gaming industry is difficult that way too. And I don't know what people can do to help that, but it's something to be aware of. Questions?
Do you yourself enjoy fantasy and sci-fi?
Yeah, I don't, personally, I don't read a lot of high fantasy, a lot of epic fantasy, and I don't read a lot of far future science fiction, but my favorite thing is a sort of, like a Neil Gaiman style, I think that's where my personal love is, but I grew up, I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark was like my favorite movie as a kid ever, and my brothers were into Star Wars, and I love Star Wars too, but Raiders and was the thing that got me here. Yeah, and it just, we would devour all those movies, and I'd read, like, Harlan Ellison was one, especially when I was younger, was one of my favorites, and so yes is the answer. And also visually like it. I mean, I like sort of the pageantry of it, and again, like storytelling, and so it's one of the places where narrative art like still exists.
As I understand it, there's a lot of turnover for art directors, kind of in a generalized way. So I've heard it's very rare to keep your job for 20 years
At the same place. I wonder if that's more true. You think in publishing, or you're hearing that more like through gaming and in publishing, really? I guess I would just have to say, certainly my own experience is not that. The friends of mine that have been doing it a while, so I guess I just haven't heard that as much. I don't know within the gaming industries and video games and stuff like that, if those industries changed quicker. It would make sense if they changed quicker. But yeah, it just hasn't been my experience.
You're talking about the online component of the magazine, and then you're hiring a lot of new illustrators, which I think is awesome. Do you see a lot of feedback from your fans about the art that you're commissioning, and about the difference of the art between that and what's considered, I think, normal for genre artists? Victo versus...
Yeah, I think the answer to that is I do hear, absolutely. But I also wonder, especially like on Facebook or something, because I'll post everything on Facebook, and people are like, "Oh man, I wish my covers looked like that." Like not mine, but like the covers. These are usually from people like, "Oh yeah, I wish the covers in general look like that." I think, but that's my Facebook fans. So I wonder if that's sort of self-selecting. I do hear it, and it is very encouraging. And I think we, as a society, are becoming much more. We're just so visually based, especially through, everybody now is using Instagram, everybody's using Facebook, everybody's using images to talk to each other in a way. So I do think people are becoming more aware of it. I also think a long time ago I started a blog, and certainly there were a lot of blogs at the time, but it wasn't quite as prevalent as it is now. And I started doing cover reveals, and now cover reveals are a thing now, like throughout publishing. So bloggers that are usually book reviewers, or people that are just uber fans that have started their own book review blogs. Now it's a big deal for them to be able to get a cover early from a publisher and talk about it, which means they're knowing the artist names, and they're this is a group of fans and readership that would not have been able to say who the artists were in the past. Just wasn't part of their vocabulary. And I think because of the website stuff, whether it's Tor.com or just these other blogs and just the way people talk to each other, I think it is becoming more and more in their conscious. And whether or not that's affecting things, I think it is. I think, I think there are definitely, Victo just did a book cover for us. Sam does a lot of our book covers. I think the industry is sort of evolving along with that. And I think also the what I sort of call these spheres of influence, within fantasy and science fiction, when I came on, Michael Whalen was when I was more of a teenager, Michael Whalen was it. Everybody wanted to look like Michael Whalen, and every publisher wanted their books to look like Michael Whalen. And then Donato, and that lasted for like 15 years. And then like a Donato comes on, and it's a little grittier, and that lasted. Everybody wanted Donato to do it, and that lasted maybe 8 years. And then you get into like the Phil Hales and the John Fosters, and I think these. I think things move faster now because you get to see more of it, and you get to people are talking about it. I don't think you get that one dominating look anymore, and I think that's all for the better. It's very vibrant that way. As much as I could love all those people, it's fun just to keep seeing these different looks coming out, and also concept art. Bringing concept art into was working with I didn't show any, but Stéphane Martinière was huge for us when we first started hiring him. cca I can work with. The trouble with concept artists is finding people that can do everything. Concept artists are so, one person does the characters, one person does the environment. So I need somebody that can do all of these things, can do the spaceship and the character and the environment. But when you find those guys, they're golden. Like, people just love that work. So it's being able to pull in from these different industries has been fantastic. Other questions?
Self-publishing, where does that fit in these days?
It's definitely, it's getting more, it's a thing. It's a viable way of getting the work out there. There are definitely a lot of success stories. It's a whole lot of work, and I think to do it well. The problem is, you see so many self-published books, and a lot of them look it, first of all, and it's funny because people won't really be able to, people are suddenly becoming art directors, and their nephew is becoming their artist, and as they're putting these things together, and hopefully maybe somebody's proofread it. But the more, the longer we're in it, and the better the tools are becoming to create these books, the better and better it's going to be. I think it's a viable. There's definitely quality out there in it, and that's going to, I think, increase as we go. But it is a lot of work, and I think a lot of people that think it will be easy find that it's not, and being able to market it. Then you got to be your own publicist and marketing manager and ad promo person. You're not spending a lot of time writing books if you're doing all of that. And I think some authors that have become very successful self-publishing eventually sign up with a publisher. Amanda Hawking was one of them, and Tor didn't pick her up. But part of all of publishing is basically three different companies. And she's so she came on through with one of our other imprints, and she just said she wanted to be able to write books rather than promote books and do these things. But it'll just grow, though, absolutely.
How often are you, when you get a brand new project, do you go to like a new illustrator as opposed to no?
As much as I can is the answer. And as I was saying with our novels, there's things there. There's whether or not it's a series. Again, so much of our list is a series, so that takes out half the books each season. And again, there's that thing of wanting to or needing to be able to trust that this person could do 6 books and things like that. But there's nothing more fun than to be like, to have been the art director that found that, this great new person, or was the first person to be able to use this. And, I have art director friends, and there's a very friendly sort of competitiveness there. Like, oh, I got Victor on a book cover. I'm like, damn, I wanted to. So we do try to as much as possible, but it's, some seasons it'll be everybody I've already worked with quite a bit, and other seasons it'll be 1 or 2. And that is why the website has been so much fun, because I can hire a lot of these people.
Is there still a need for art beyond the cover?
What's that?
Is there still a need for artwork beyond the cover?
It's tough in adult publishing to do interiors. I think there have been times we've done it, and it's made a real difference. But I think a lot of times it's hard to get the budgets in there to do a lot, and I don't think that our salespeople feel that it increases the sales of the book very much. That said, because we are in this very shareable world where you want to be able to Facebook things and this and that, it's another component. It's something else to talk about. When publicists are sort of sick of saying the same things about every book, season after season, it gives them something else to go to, to be able to talk about, to go to the web and to go to these different blogs and say, hey, we've got original art. We'll give you a few to show and you a few to show. So I hope there's room for that to grow, but it's not a big part of adult publishing at this point, which is a shame.
So in the world where you take a tiny step outside of our community, it seems that there's so much focus on graphic design. I mean, companies have in-house graphic designers, and then illustration is always hired freelance, and nobody seems to know what it is in the world outside of us. I was just wondering what that looked like from your point.
I am lucky that within science fiction and fantasy, that's a little less so, that the artists would go to, they go to conventions and they're part of they're part of the guests of honor, and people do, when there's awards for the science fiction community within that include the artwork. The big award for science fiction is the Hugo Award, and there is an artist Hugo and things like that. So I am lucky that there's more awareness there than in mainstream publishing. It's absolutely true in mainstream publishing that it is harder to get illustration approved. I have friends of mine that work in other parts of the company, I think are fans of illustration. They have a much harder time getting it through. So, did that answer your question? I sort of lost track of the.
There's just so much power behind the term graphic designer, and I was just wondering what your
Yes, there is, and I know going to see like a lot of the year-end student shows in New York. I think graphic designers can mature quicker, which is not a truthful. It's not that the ideas are better, but everything's very slick looking. And you go to the senior shows, and it's all polished. It's all sort of coming out of, all the ideas are going into the computer and then coming out of it. And the illustrators, I think very few people become an artist in 4 years. I just don't think that's. I think I didn't normally say like I do sort of expect that it takes like 4 or 5 years for somebody to go from school to being a regular, earning their career. Painting and with the graphic designers, I think it's that road's a little easier. In the end, I think it's again, it's not about the ideas or anything, and it's not about who's working harder. It's just I think that process of learning how to paint, just physically the materials of it, takes longer to learn.
How many like in-house graphic designers does Tor keep on staff?
We have 4. We have 4 full-time.
Well, you said that you guys were studying comics in the website. Well, I'm trying to remember what I was gonna say. Do you guys hire like a script, or do you hire one guy to do like everything?
We tend to, because we're not sort of in the comics business, but we found that we just knew some people that could tell really great stories that wanted to be, storytellers in that way. So we've tended to do it when some of them have been teams. We're sort of what we haven't done so much is like if we had a story we wanted to tell, find the author, have them do it, and then find the artist. What we've done is found people that are like, we have this story to get between the two of us, and then we'll hire them to do it. As I say, we don't do, we'll do 3 or 4 a year where we'll do, this year we're going to be doing a story every week. So we'll do 52 stories at least. I think we're going to be doing more than that actually in the end, which is neat. It's 52 more artworks in the world.
Yeah, what's the submission process for the short stories? Are you getting them? Are you seeking out people?
For the stories themselves or for the artwork for the stories?
Stories.
The stories, we do both. We have what's within publishing, it's called the slush pile. And it's all the unsolicited manuscripts that come in, and that's usually true for novels. And we also have a slush pile for the short stories. There's on Tor.com. There's a submissions section, and you can find the email address to send those to. And we've published stories out of the slush pile, but we also have 4 editors that work for us that know a lot of authors and are going to them, or they're authors that want to work with them. So there's that more, and that we do publish more from the editors than straight up from the slush pile. But we won the Hugo for short story last year, and it was a slush pile submission. So it was a bit of a ringer of a slush pile. She probably should have just sent it straight to us, but that's where we found it. So.
What's the average turnaround time you expect from an artist?
I usually, certainly no less than 4 weeks, and I know that a lot of the artists I work with are going to be booked like 3 months ahead of time or so. So hopefully there's a couple of months in there, but 4 weeks is certainly the minimum I would like to have. We've done worse, definitely. There've been times where I needed something in a week or so, but. Way in the back.
On that, is there a different turnaround for the Tor.com versus the
I tend to go a little shorter, but I don't. But if I have to, we've had what's interesting is I'm able to use people that are more used to editorial deadlines there. So sometimes I'll cut it a little shorter. The nice thing about I run the whole website, so I can change the schedules there. Whereas I can't at all do that with the book covers. So if I want an artist and they can't do it in the time, I just move the stories around. So. Anyone else?
Have
seen any noticeable shift in difference in sales between products that are done in traditional illustration media versus newer digital media? Is there any
No.
great difference?
No, I mean, at this point, so much is digital, or a lot is started traditionally and then finished off digitally. It's really just the quality of the work versus, and matching the right kind of work with the right kind of story. I don't think I've ever even. I don't even know how to test that really, because it's really about the author and how much we put into the marketing and all these other things. There are definitely times where people say that this book did really well because of the cover. It's hard to say, but there have been occasional, there have been occasional examples where it became very clear that the cover sort of made the book. But whether that's traditional or digital, it doesn't seem to matter much. Anyone else?
How much information do you send an illustrator for a cover?
That depends. Some of the people are fans of that like to read the book, and at that point we'll just send them the book, and that's great, because we're doing, if we're doing a couple hundred books a year, I'm not reading a couple hundred books a year, and I'm usually I'll go through a series of conversations with the editor and try to, like, what does the book feel like? Is there anything obvious that would be for the cover? And I try to get as much information out of them as possible. But some books are easier some books are more obvious, have more obvious solutions than others. Some editors are a little better about thinking about covers than others. So, sometimes something will seem like nearly impossible to solve, and if the artist then reads the whole book, they can really bring out a lot of more the nuances, or find something that they can do something really special with. But I don't expect that to be their job. Like, if they don't want to spend the week it takes to read it, or the couple of days or whatever, I certainly won't make them do that. So sometimes it's a synopsis, sometimes it's a scene, some character descriptions. Kind of depends on the kind of book it is too. If it's epic fantasy, the fans there want everything to be exactly right. They want, every little detail, so there I'll just try to get all of that information from the editor. If it's something more like contemporary world, you can get away with more just a synopsis and the feel of the book. So it really depends on the project, and it depends on the artist. So.
Is there value in the industry for illustrators who can also do text?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it really is sort of both, as long as the person can do both equally well. I think the one, Something More Than Night, that I show, the Will Steele, I think he's more of a graphic designer, but everything's very illustrative that he does. And that's a case where I just hired him to do the cover, the entire thing. And there's a couple of people that, Ross McDonald, I also showed that he can do the type and the imagery as well. So yeah, that tends to be a style, I think, though, too. It's not like I can do this painting and I can do text. Like, it tends to be, that is what they do. That's how they, that is their style and what it is they're known for.
How much input does the author, or can the author, have on the artwork, or do you ever find yourself being a mediator between the artist and the author?
I try. Depends is always the answer. Technically speaking, contractually speaking, the authors very rarely have approval. However, the more important the author is, the more the publishers don't want to piss them off, and they become very, very much part of the process. I try to keep the artist and the author as separate as possible. Doesn't seem like it would make sense, but it does. I think the authors, there's the author that this book is my baby, therefore nothing is good enough for it, or this book is my baby, therefore everything's awesome, and you never know which one you're getting until you're in the thick of it. And the authors, I always try to tell them, if everything that's in the book is on the book, there's no reason to read the book, and they want to get everything that's in the book on the book. I'm just like, you can't do that. We are, somebody's walking through a bookstore, somebody's running through an airport. You do have to grab their attention within seconds, and I think it's easy for them to lose sight of that. So lots of authors and lots of editors want, really what they want is like a 10-second animation on their cover. And that's impractical. So, but if they hate it that much and they complain to their agent, and there's definitely times where we change it. Absolutely. So, for better sometimes and for worse others.
Yeah, speaking
trailers?
We haven't done, well, we've done trailers. No, I have not been involved in, like the actual, like little yeah, we've definitely, I am not, that's usually more part of the ad promo department or publicity department. I haven't done it. I'm not a big fan of them. I love animation, so I would, like, if there are a few of them that are just beautiful pieces of animation. I think most book trailers, especially for fantasy, tend to look like really bad movie, like, like why make this look like a B movie rather than make it look like a decent book? But it's, but people keep doing them. I guess people think they're worth it. Now, then the question is, are you ever going to do like moving book covers? And we kind of did one by accident, because we did this was another one, Greg's. He did a very long painting, and only the front cover was going to show, and so we kind of like cycled through it online, and it got a bit of buzz about it, and it was sort of fun. But whether or not book covers will be replaced by some sort of moving image, I don't know. I think people will start to make hybrid versions of storytelling that'll be very interesting. I also think people don't read books because there isn't enough television to watch. I think, people love still that very narrative, very linear storytelling, that it's not choose your own way and it's not interactive, like you tell me the story and the story has consequences along the way that, you're going to resolve. And I think that's what I love about books over like some other like forms of storytelling. And so along with that, I think people love still images, and hopefully they will continue to do so. As I say, while also exploring these amazing other ways of telling stories. I think so far there's room for everything.
So can you judge a book by its cover?
I would say, as an art director, I would never buy a book because of its cover, because certainly I wouldn't recommend every one of our books. But I wouldn't recommend every one of our covers either. Like, it's, you try every one. You really do. We really care about every one. And whether or not, it always works, you just try the best you can. But I've not bought books because of their covers. So I have been that person, but like, people tell me this book is good, and I just can't believe it, like, based on this. So people do judge books by their covers, absolutely. When you're walking through, again, if you're just browsing through, you pick something up, and I do it all the time. That looks good. And then after that, it is the author's job to, it's the editor's job to have the blurb, be meaningful. It's the author's job to have the first few pages really grab you. But you picked it up because of the cover. Absolutely, books are judged by their covers. So. And also, I am actually, my publishing friends hate this, but if you don't like a cover, rip it off. Like, it's there to, it's there to sell a book, it's there to be a piece of advertising, but I have no problems. If a book's too thick, I'll just rip it in half and read the first half and then read the second half. It's the words are what's, this is why I don't care about ebooks versus traditional books, like, read the book.
Do you know if there's much of a market for illustration outside of science fiction and fantasy?
I mean, in the book, within more mainstream, it's less so, certainly. If you go through a Barnes & Noble, you'll see lots of photography, lots of design throughout more mainstream. Children's books and young adult is still highly illustrated. Middle grade is great because the styles are all over the place. It's fun. We don't do it. I wish we did. We do young adult, but not middle grade. I don't know, fads. I think I don't have a sense of why this just sort of become more, as people have got more used to photography and film, and I don't really have a good answer for that.
If for some reason Tor magically folded overnight, what would you do next?
It would have to be within the industry. I would have to, I think, stay within science fiction and fantasy because it is so illustration based, and it is just what I know. So probably at one of the gaming companies or something, making magic cards.
Cover, because science fiction and fantasy often gets really accused of using the same cliches over and over again, especially in
We are aware, and I'm aware when we're doing it, and I'm aware when I'm trying not to do it. And I do try. I always say my boss gives me a lot of freedom because I know when not to exercise it. There are certain looks that have become a signifier for that kind of fiction, and there are definitely times where we want the reader to know what kind of book they're getting, and then there are other books where you can say we don't want it to look like every other book. We don't want it to look like, a typical whatever epic fantasy or some such, and then we try to go away from those tropes. So understanding that they're there is important, and understanding how to use them and when to use them, when not to use them.
Is Tor linked with any West Coast companies?
No, we're pretty much all. I'm trying to think if that's absolutely true. Yes, we're pretty much all in New York, and then there's Tor UK in London, and there's another offshoot in Australia. And then, so we're becoming more, as publishing is becoming more global, we are becoming much more aware of our sort of brothers and sisters across the pond. Certainly through the website too, I've been sort of tasked to really pull together a lot of their marketing concerns and ours, and try to combine forces a lot more than we have in previous years. Oop. Well, that doesn't have to. I'm willing to answer questions literally all night long. I'm not keeping track of time though, so if anybody needed to go anywhere, I have no idea what time it is.
You mentioned earlier that some books their sales benefit more from covers than others. I was just wondering where you hear that feedback from and how they know that cover was responsible for the books.
There are times when is that just going to go away? No. Why do I feel suddenly self-conscious? Because I don't have an MBA. I don't know what that is. Anyway. When there are books, because the cover is my boss will tell you the cover is one of the most important things, which is always very nice when he admits that. Who the author is the first thing. If you have Stephen King, you have Stephen King. Millions of people will buy your book. Friend recommendation is the second thing that gets people to buying the book, and the cover is usually number 3. So it's the first thing the publishers can actually affect. It's the first thing we could play with and change if we need to, and this and that. And not every book is treated equally in-house. Some books get much bigger marketing budgets than other books. We pay for some books much more than other books. And so occasionally you get a book that you didn't pay much for, you didn't expect to get many out. The editor thought it was a nice little book and they wanted to do it. And it does much better than, if it had a great cover and everybody talked internally, they loved it, and it went to the bookstore and the book buyers really loved it. Those are usually the cases where they could say, wow, this really made a difference. We do a series of these sort of Irish tales, and that was a case where the book did perform much better than anybody expected, and everybody had loved the cover. And so there, as I say, it's hard to pinpoint the one thing that made everybody go buy any book, whether it was the New York Times ad that we spent a fortune for, or whether it was the interview they got on Boing Boing, or whatever it was. It's difficult, but there are occasionally points where we can say that was the difference, at that point. So.
Do you notice any difference in consumption of illustrated covers in overseas markets versus the U.S.? Is there any other group that really loves illustrations from the same way?
There's a whole lot of online people love to debate, like UK covers suck, US is the best, US sucks, UK is the best, and they'll do cover, or like they'll go to they'll put the same book with the 2 different covers and which ones are better, and it's people love doing that. Whether or not I could say one is more illustrative, I know the UK budgets are a lot less, but people like that they're much more restrained. The US covers tend to be a little bit more garish or a little more out there, but. Honestly, there are good and bad examples, in both. I don't know if anyone is more illustrated than the other. Again, I'm always filtering everything through science fiction and fantasy, which is so heavily illustrated to begin with that it's and photo illustrators now. I mean, you get there's a guy actually in the UK, Larry Rostand, who does beautiful photography and he gets all the costuming and everything, and he's it's not stock photography, he's creating these things for each book, and that's becoming very popular, as well, or people that can take the photographs and manipulate it a lot. Cliff Nielsen is an artist that uses very photo-based, but he could still make the big dragon and the this and that, and so it's very illustrative and being photo-based. So, but whether one is more popular, it's hard to really analyze that.
Covers for different markets? Do you hire different artists or just the same artist, different work?
We won't at this point. If we're doing the Tor UK and Tor US has acted very independently, and as we're just now starting to sort of, combine things a bit more. A lot of times, if they've done a book first, or even if it's a different publisher and we're doing the U.S., maybe half the time I'll use their artwork, and another half the time I'll say, we need to do something different. And I think the same is if it's going from the U.S. to the U.K. So yeah, maybe about half the time we're changing it. But I'm not responsible for the U.K. cover. It's just whether or not I liked it enough to say, okay, we'll buy the U.S. rights for that. Authors are paid through royalties, and artists are usually just paid per job. So, what am I thinking? So I'll buy like US rights while somebody else buys the UK rights. And so. Anyone else? Anyway, did I actually run out? You ran out of questions? Not a single one, not one last one. Now the pressure's on. All right.
How often do you hire students immediately out of school, or student illustrators for that matter?
I would say that's increasing. I think when I first came out of school, I think people are better sooner. I do think, and I think that is what the internet is one of the things that it's given us. When I was in high school, I was the only person in the world that liked to draw. Like, I was it. There was nobody else in the universe that liked doing what I did. I was in the suburbs of Long Island, and then I went to school, and suddenly there was 60 people that liked to do this thing. I think people growing up now are growing up knowing that this stuff exists and getting input, and there are online communities where people are sharing their work and critiquing each other, from high school on. And I think just the awareness and the ability to do that research and to share work and critique each other. I see people in again, I always go to the Society student show. That's like one of my favorite things all year. And I'll hire one or two of those kids pretty quickly, if not even like right then. So more so now. I would say more so in the last 5 years than in my first 15 years. Anyone else?
I have a question. So when an artist is trying to build a portfolio, would you be kind of turned off if some of their pictures look like they were derived from books that have already been published?
No, I do think it's funny. It's a little obvious when like I would say don't put the type on and don't try to make it look like a book cover for Lord of the Rings or something. If you're inspired by one book or another, do the work. It will directly relate to publishing, which is good. But if people are starting to like kind of make it look like it was a job, I think that becomes obvious pretty quickly, and an art director will get turned off by bad type very quickly. So I would say don't do that, but being inspired by Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or something, I think is fine. And it does it relates exactly to what we're doing. So.
Do you take in interns?
We don't. My only the big problem is the Flatiron is a triangle, which is a terrible use of office space. I love being in the building, and I would never want to move. But we have no space for interns. I would love to have an intern, though. I think if we had anywhere to put them, I would. So, anyone else? I didn't know the time.